This is part 2 of interview 1, Devops with Kai Jiang, the second half of the demo. And we're back.
Okay, so after some technical difficulties, I've had to switch to a different project because that one has been approved for compute cycles with Microsoft. So I've replicated the same pipeline that we built in my other project, and I've saved it. So this time, let's run it.
Cool.
Hopefully it won't go red on us.
Right. I was hoping to leave half an hour for the interview, so that gives us up to another half hour if we need it for this.
I'll probably only need another 10-15 minutes, I think,
Cool.
if all goes well. Okay, so you can see that it breaks out each task into basically a row here. So if we had both of them in the same task, you will see that this thing fails. So sometimes people will prefer to have visual clarity in the log showing them which step it failed at.
Okay.
You can take appropriate action based on the point that it failed as well. But because we're running effectively because we're running two commands, there's not much point in splitting them out. But let's say we wanted to run two entirely different processes, then maybe it makes a bit more sense. The next section of the demo, I'm going to put a task to retrieve a file from Azure, and then a task to write the file to Azure. So that probably might demonstrate the use of different tasks a little bit more.
Yeah. Can you tell from this output where it's up to?
It's still building the image. So I'll briefly explain. So in here, because we've set up this this pipeline to link up to this repository here.
Yep.
The first thing that it does have to do is it's checking out all the files in the repo, and it's just targeting the main branch. So now this entire repository is in the working directory, and then this is basically running off the working directory. So the command that it runs, okay, now it's finished building.
Right.
Right, okay. So the reason why this failed was because I did a little modification compared to the original code.
Okay.
And I have to actually modify the... So basically, the original code was able to write stuff out, but I modified it so that I have to provide an output directory. And that output directory is actually provided by running... so if I actually put these into scripts... Let me edit this job. So one of the nice things about using this tool is it retains the failed run and all the artifacts and logs associated with your failed run.
Okay.
So if I come back to here, it tells me when it ran, how long it ran, what were the errors. So I'm going to now, which makes debugging. So this was the default command. This is the command that I actually need to use. So these two pieces of information are important. So this particular Python file, the inference, actually requires an output directory as an environment variable.
Yep.
To write out the output CSV. And the way we specify that is using, when we do Docker run, we can say --env output dir, and I'm just telling it the root folder output is where you should write to. But actually inside that Docker container, there is no root output folder. So I'm going to do one more thing, which is map a folder on the machine, which is not inside the Docker container, to a folder inside the Docker container. This is one of the nice features of Docker, which allows you to essentially create a link, a storage link, between a folder on the machine that's running the Docker image and a folder inside the Docker image. What then that allows us, what then that will do is if I put ls, actually,
that's a common occurrence, right? Moving things from outside the container.
Pretty much do that all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add another command here. Show files. I'm just going to do it ls-l. So if we run this, then it's going to pass. But once this finishes running, this line, which is effectively when it runs that inference.py, when it gets to this part, it's actually going to write a file to // output, which will actually translate to the folder that this command is running in. So pwd essentially just says, give me the current location. So if we
wait, slow down that again. So it's that pwd that's in the environment that's running the Docker. Is that right?
So pwd is basically a command to show what directory you're currently in in Linux.
No, I've got that. But that refers to that part of it is for the environment that Docker's sitting in.
That's the inside this particular machine.
Yeah, that's right.
Where we're running.
And the output
the working directory. The output just maps that directory as a directory called output inside the Docker container. And then what we're doing is telling this file that the environment variable output dir refers to the output directory.
But is that part inside Docker or in Ubuntu? So which part is inside the Docker container and which part is Ubuntu?
This is the folder outside the Docker container on the host machine.
Okay.
This is the link to it inside the container.
Okay.
This is just an environment variable telling this script to use this folder.
Oh, okay. I think I missed that. What is it, like a colon?
Yeah. So this is -v is essentially a volume mount.
Yeah.
And --env is to specify environment variables.
Yeah. No, that helps. Thanks.
So let's queue it up.
So, if we have a second, when you're say you wrote the repo in example, would you work locally to do all that, and then only at this stage would you come in and start configuring and debugging?
It's a combination. Some of the things that occur here I can actually do. So all of these things here I've actually ran locally when I was doing the prep. That's how I created these files.
Okay.
So I can actually run this on my machine, and essentially one of the nice things about Docker is portability. So I ran the build and the run process on my machine and verified that the output file got written to my local directory as expected. So it's gone through.
So that kind of takes care of most of the quirks. You're only coming into edge case Azure specific things here.
I say that there are a lot of quirks associated with not running on your own machine. So I would think of it as I can get the fundamental building blocks working on my local machine, but to configure it correctly to work in an automated fashion in a remote machine, there is still trial and debugging that requires to be done when we run it in here.
Yeah.
And sometimes the configuration can be equal, if not more, the amount of work as building the original fundamental.
I mean, that's typical, right? Going to production always takes a lot longer than getting like something working example.
Okay, so it's failed, but it didn't fail at the same spot. You can see that the inference pi actually ran.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at our last run, so last time it just failed to start. Got a permission error. That's interesting. It got a permission error because. So this worked perfectly on my local machine. So we need to write into.
Is it something like in the Docker file you have to specify the user you're running the the Python job as?
Have to.
Right, permissions. When you do the mount, is there something to do with permissions?
Did the PWD not work? So both times actually.
Right, it doesn't look like it was in the log, right?
Try and do this. Just give me a sec. Try it locally.
Guess this feedback loop is slightly painful compared to doing data analysis, unless like the training model takes a long time, but here you'd have to run the whole pipeline to just try something, so you've probably put a bit more thought into it than just guessing at it.
Think of this as me tweaking the training model. So let's say if your training model takes 3 hours, and you have to tweak a parameter in the training algorithm, then you're going to have to run that 3-hour training process again. Once I've gotten this fleshed out, then what would happen is effectively the model is now trained. The model being, in this case, the automated build and run process, and then we can inject different data into there. I'm just running a command locally just to double check.
Can you give the how you use the PWD? Can't you just explicitly type where you wanted it to go, like home/Ubuntu, whatever?
Kind of, but because I'm running on a remote machine, I'm actually not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed to know exactly which folder that I'm in. But I think the PWD wasn't the problem. I think the permission was the actual problem. I'm not sure why it won't let me write that file to, because it actually the inference process ran, because this is the result.
Yeah.
It's just when it writes to output, it got a permission denied.
Because that's on the root, right?
Yes, but it shouldn't cause a problem. I can tweak it by doing. I can say. No, it shouldn't matter. Inside the container, it's definitely permissions are definitely fine. It's more that I think that the machine is not letting the Docker process write to that location.
Yeah, and so
which is rather strange because I'm inside the working directory, so I can.
No, so you're saying inside the working directory, but when you that /output/output.csv, So you need to be root if that's in Ubuntu.
That's inside the Docker container.
Oh, it's inside. Okay.
Yeah. So it looks like it's at root inside the Docker container, but it's actually just in my working in. So if we do echo pwd,
Wait. So then, is it failing inside the Docker container?
it's failing to. It's not having enough permissions to write to the machine that's running the Docker.
Okay.
I'm just gonna have a quick look at.
Because inside the Docker container, it looks as if I
believe it's all root permissions inside.
Yeah, but I'm just saying the file system looks as if you're in a completely another new OS,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the root level restrictions are applied by the OS, not necessarily by the file system. So inside the Docker container, there's no restrictions to where you can and can't write. The restrictions only come into play when we're running on the base machine.
Right. In a known way, or just depending on where that Docker image is sitting?
The Docker process gets run by a service called Docker daemon.
Yeah.
So what seems to be happening is the Docker daemon doesn't have permissions to write to that location, which again seems rather odd. But let's have a look.
Yeah, you did an echo of the pwd command.
Yeah, so that'll tell me which location we're telling output to write to. It'll tell me which location we're binding output to.
I remember reading that example a little while ago. Do you remember what the actual application was? It was something EEG. Was that like electro signals?
It's brainwaves.
Brainwaves? Yeah, okay. Interesting one. I think it's quite a learning curve for a data scientist to get across all this.
There's quite a few moving parts, I guess. Right. So the first line. Okay. So this is the output of echo, which should be okay. I actually don't see any issue with writing to that location. This is where
I'm going to suggest a pause and let's pause and come up with a game plan. I'll stop the recording. This concludes part 2 of interview 1, Devops with Kai Jiang. The second half of the demo. Links to parts 1, the first half of the demo, and part 3, the interview, can be found in the description below. If there's demand, we'll go back and complete the application of DevOps for data science example. Please let us know in the comments